And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And as we thrash around with these technical issues, I want to go back and talk about this story about how Germany is basically trying to do what's best for the German people. Merkel and the German government are saying, do we want to plunge the German people further into debt to help all these other countries with debts that were not of their own making? Remember what happened that kicked this whole thing off was Greece. And Greece got into trouble because Goldman Sachs got in there to the government they had before Papandreou, and they basically conspired to conceal the debt, and in the process ran the debt up even worse than it had been before. That's really what triggered a lot of this crisis in the Eurozone, along with, of course, all the losses from the mortgage-backed security fraud. So now Germany is saying, no, we're not going to do any more of this buying bonds to try and bail everybody out, because it's just driving everybody deeper into debt, permanently into debt to the bankers. And so the media is coming out and they're saying, Germany is trying to force the European Union to do things their way. And what was the word they used? The Teutonic threat. They're implying they're going back to the Nazi days. So it's all going to be Germany's fault because they won't play by the rules that make the private central bankers rich and the people poor. So the media is going to demonize them. How dare you turn your back on the private bankers? How dare you want to be free of your serfdom? So they're going to call Germany bad names. They're going to boycott them and say, you've got to take your rightful place living beneath the private central bankers. Except, of course, we've been down this road before. Back in 1933, when Germany threw out the private central bank imposed on Germany by the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I, which resulted in this runaway inflation where, I mean, it was so bad, people were carrying around their money in wheelbarrows. And thieves would take the wheelbarrow and leave the money behind. That's how bad the inflation was. So the German government kicked out the private central bank, and they started issuing a state-issued value-based currency that did not accrue interest to the private central bankers, and it turned the life for the German people around so dramatically that the media called it the German miracle. And if you remember from yesterday, all these quotes from Winston Churchill where they were saying Germany's economy was blossoming. They were the only nation in the area that wasn't enslaved to a private central bank, so of course their economy was going to take off. They were becoming this amazing industrial powerhouse because their money was circulating through and building factories and creating jobs. It wasn't just building palaces for the money junkies. And, of course, the global bankers can't have that. If the rest of the world sees how well this works without a private central bank, they'll want to get rid of the private central banks around the entire world. So the bankers organized a global boycott of Germany to try and sabotage and destroy Germany's value-based currency and drive them back into submission to the private central banks. This basically set the stage for World War II, and that didn't really work out too well for anybody. Except, of course, for the bankers, who loaned both sides money for bombs and weapons and bullets, and then more money after it was all over for reconstruction and repair. So everybody came out with basically what they had before World War II, only now they were hideously in debt to the bankers. I mean, Germany only paid off their debt from World War I a few years ago. So, of course, we're ready for a new World War. Got to plunge them back into debt. So here we are again with the German government trying to do what is best for the German people, what works best for the German people's economy and wealth and comfort. And once again, the private central bankers are saying, we've got to boycott them, we've got to shut them down, we have to drive them back to their rightful place beneath the private central bankers. In the process, of course, they're driving us one more step towards a new world war. But not to worry, the bankers are there ready with their checkbook to loan you all the money you need for bombs and bullets and weapons. And after it's all over and somebody's won and somebody's lost, and it doesn't really matter who, they'll be there to loan you more money to build back up what you had before but was destroyed in the war. See how it all works here? Germany is doing right by the German people. That's what the German government is supposed to do. And the media is demonizing them because they won't go with this global fascist dictatorship model. So they're going to say, oh, they're reverting to Nazi thinking. Well, The Nazis didn't have all bad ideas. They had some good ideas. The Volkswagen, the Bauhaus, and a state-issued value-based currency, which was the real reason for the war. And again, go back and read Churchill's quotes about it. They forced war on Germany because Germany's state-issued currency was a threat to the private central bankers, just like Gaddafi's gold dinar was a threat to the private central bankers, just like the original American silver certificate and Kennedy's U.S. notes were a threat to the Federal Reserve and the private central bankers. Now, the reality is the Eurozone is about to come apart because they've run out of corks. They can't find the 11th marble, whatever metaphor you want to use. And these nations are going to start defaulting, and the rest of the nations are going to say, we can't let ourselves get dragged down with them. We have to cut the lines and the cords. We have to shut our borders, and we have to take care of ourselves. It's called survival. So this could get very, very ugly very, very quickly. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Got a reader email pointing out a very good fact we need to keep in our minds. Okay, Germany has paid more money into supporting the Eurozone than any other nation. So, yeah, at some point they're going to say, look, we can't do this any longer. We're throwing good money after bad, just like we, the American people, are doing with Wall Street and the federal government. We're never going to get that money back. And all we get for that money is more abuse.
Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I'm just putting up some new things at the website, including somebody just sent me an article from Veterans Today that goes into what I was just saying about Germany's real crime leading to World War II was the abandonment of debt servitude to private central banks in favor of a government-issued value-based currency. And if that sounds a little familiar, it should, because that was how the United States started out. We fought a revolution to be free of private central banking. And sadly, because of corruption within our own United States government, we have been sold back into the clutches of private central bankers, not just once, but 3 times. And all 3 times have brought this nation to the edge of ruin, where we are right now today. I would say probably more people than ever before are willing to look back at our history and say, yeah, we were probably lied to about all this stuff. Bay of Pigs, Gulf of Tonkin, USS Maine, Pearl Harbor. They were all lies. Everything was rewritten, reshaped, propagandized, spun to trick you into doing what the government wants, which is to give them your money and the lives of your children in pointless wars of conquest. That's how it works in this country. The liars get promoted. The liars get rewarded. The liars get the perks. The truth can be had for free in this country. But a lie pays big bucks. America is the home of public relations. As an industry, what is public relations? Spin doctoring, to put it politely, lying to the people. Like when Hill and Knowlton came up with that story about the nurse from Kuwait who said the Iraqi troops were stealing the incubators and leaving the babies on the floor to die, which was nonsense. Babies existed and survived long before incubators. They have blankets. Pick the kid up, wrap him in a blanket, and he's not going to die. And this was all put on the media by Hill and Knowlton. The girl wasn't even a nurse. She was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador. And they sold you another lie. That's how they control and rule you, with lies. Actually, anybody doing fake terror plots in this country ought to be hung, drawn, and quartered, in my opinion. When leaders, when rulers lie their people into wars of conquest, that is the worst crime a ruler can commit against their own people, to lie them into a war of conquest, to trick them into a war of conquest. And that's what the U.S. government's been doing ever since 9/11. Boom, terrorist attack. Let's go attack Afghanistan, take it over, take all their oil. Now we got to do Iraq. Now we got to do Syria. Now we got to do, Yemen. We got to go into Libya. We got to, all these places. 10 and counting. And now they're trying to basically get into Syria. Now they're still trying to sell you the idea of going into Iran. This government lied you into these wars of conquest. Your children are paying the ultimate price. for the greed of the money junkies. Now Obama's out here trying to get a war going with the Chinese so they don't have to pay them back the money they owe. So, anyway, moving right along here. That's an interesting little story. Hang on, let me see if I got the details on this right. Apparently there's this right-wing group somewhere down in the Deep South, and they're creating a book listing businesses that hire blacks. And they're going around saying, do not do business with any of these companies in the South that are hiring blacks. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I misread that. It's a group in Israel that's creating the book listing businesses that employ Palestinians and going around saying, please don't do business with these companies hiring Palestinians. So I guess that makes it okay, right? We're paying for all this stuff. Now, apparently there is yet another renewed campaign to free Jonathan Pollard, the man who single-handedly undermined America's nuclear deterrent and made us all vulnerable to an attack by the Soviet Union had they chosen to do so. And Pollard took this information, gave it to Israel. Israel turned around and gave it to the Soviet Union in exchange for increased immigration quotas. This is supposed to be our friend in the Middle East. That nuclear deterrent, whether you agree with nuclear weapons or not, and I think the world would be better off without them, that nuclear deterrent cost my parents' generation $5 trillion to build, and that was back when a trillion was really a lot of money. People didn't even talk with that many zeros. $5 trillion. We're still making payments on that. And it was all there to make sure that we would not be attacked by the Soviet Union. And Jonathan Pollard basically turned around and he gave that to Israel. Israel gave it to the Soviet Union. And between the time Israel gave that information to the Soviet Union and the treachery was discovered and corrected, had there been a nuclear war with the Soviet Union, the United States would have lost. But Pollard's supporters are saying he's such a good boy. He's a nice Jewish boy. Really, he's suffered enough. No, he hasn't. He should have been shot. When the Rosenbergs gave the secret of the atomic bomb to the Soviet Union, they were executed. Pollard's in a club fed. Apparently he's roomies with Bernie Madoff with the loot. Anyway, they're trying to get everybody to call Obama and call for Pollard's release. I think we all ought to call Obama and say, string him up. Firing squad, little bullets. We'll be right back.